Most people love a good rags to riches story. It's the classic American dream, right? You start with nothing, you grind, you hustle, and suddenly you're on a yacht. But nobody talks about the opposite. Nobody wants to hear about the guy who had it all, the cars, the respect, the empire, and lost it overnight. That's usually where the movie ends, but for me, that's exactly where the story begins. I want you to picture this. I was running a family business that was an absolute beast. With a lot of hard work and honestly, a lot of help from above, we took that company from making $8 million a year to over $30 million a year. I was at the command of 40 employees. I had the corner office. You know the kind I'm talking about. Mahogany desk, leather chair, a panoramic view of the city that made you feel like you were on top of the world. Life was good. Actually, life was perfect. I felt untouchable. But here is the brutal truth about money. It can disappear a lot faster than it appears. For personal reasons that I won't bore you with, I had to make the hardest decision of my life. I had to leave that family business. I walked away from the $30 million empire I helped build. I left the security, the paycheck, and the prestige. It felt like jumping off a cliff without checking if I had a parachute. I thought I could land on my feet easily. After all, I knew how to make money, right? I had done it before, but the universe has a funny way of humbling you. Almost overnight, my reality shattered. I went from riches to rags. The bank account dried up, the phone stopped ringing. The friends who used to love my success suddenly got very busy. I found myself trying to start over, but the magic just wasn't there. Fast forward a few months. Forget the mahogany desk, forget the view. I was now sitting in a tiny, cramped room. My new office was a cheap white plastic desk I bought at Walmart, and my chair, it wasn't Italian leather, it was a $10 metal folding chair that squeaked every time I moved. I was sitting there alone, staring at the wall. The silence was deafening. I went from managing 40 people to managing my own anxiety. I looked at my bank balance and felt that pit in my stomach. You know the one that tells you you've made a huge mistake. I was at the absolute bottom, and just when I thought it couldn't get more awkward, I heard a knock on the door. It was the one person I wasn't ready to see. Before we see who walked through that door and changed everything, make sure you're following the channel. We dig up stories like this every week to help you find your own treasure. Every year, like clockwork, Rabbi Raskin from Montreal would come to visit me. This was a tradition going back to the glory days. He would walk into my big fancy office, we'd catch up, have some coffee, and he would ask me to pledge a certain amount of money to tzedakah, charity. Over the years, as the business grew from 8 million to 30 million, I would increase my donation. A few thousand more here, a few thousand more there. It was never a burden. In fact, it made me feel good. It was part of the deal. I make money, I give money back. The last time he visited me, before my life fell apart, I had pledged $18,000 for the year. Back then, that was easy. Writing an $18,000 check didn't pinch. It was just another business expense, another way to say thank you for the success. But this time was different. The rabbi had the old address. He probably went to the big building first, asked for me, and they sent him to my new location. When the door opened and he walked into my tiny room, he stopped, dead in his tracks. I'll never forget the look on his face. He turned white. He was used to seeing the commander-in-chief of a $30 million empire. And here he finds me, hunched over a Walmart desk in a folding chair. The contrast was humiliating. I could see him processing the scene. There were no assistants, no ringing phones, just me and the hum of a cheap light bulb. He didn't say anything at first. He just walked over, pulled up another cheap folding chair, and sat down across from me. He put his elbows on the flimsy table and looked me in the eye. He didn't have to ask what happened. The room spoke for itself. He knew. He knew the empire was gone. He knew the cash flow was zero. Most people in that situation would have offered pity. They would have said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, let me leave you alone." But Rabbi Raskin was different. He looked at me with this intense compassion, but also with a strange determination. He said, "I know you are going through a hard time. I know it is difficult. I was waiting for him to let me off the hook. I owed the previous year's pledge, and I had no idea how I was going to pay it. But then he dropped a bomb. He said, 'Because I know you're struggling, this year I am not going to ask you for $18,000. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I thought he was going to say, "Just give me $100 or don't worry about it this year." But that's not what he said. If you were in my shoes, broke and humiliated, what would you expect the rabbi to say next? Would you expect mercy or something else? Let me know in the comments what you would have done in that moment. The room was silent. Then he finished his sentence. "I'm not going to ask you for $18,000. This year, I'm going to ask you for $36,000. I froze. I actually thought I heard him wrong. $36,000. I looked at him like he was crazy. Was this a joke? I'm sitting here in a folding chair, practically counting pennies to buy lunch, and he wants double what I gave when I was running a multi-million-dollar company? It made absolutely no logical sense. In the business world, you look at the balance sheet. If revenue is down, expenses must go down. Charity is usually the first thing people cut when times get tough. But here he was, asking me to double my expenses when my revenue was zero. The first emotion that hit me wasn't fear, it was anger. Pure, hot anger. How dare he? How could he have the audacity to ask me for such a thing? I wanted to scream at him. Are you blind? Look around you. Do you see a mahogany desk? Do you see a staff of 40 people? It felt insulting. It felt like he was kicking me when I was down. I felt my face getting hot. I wanted to throw him out of the office. It seemed so cruel. Here I was, drowning, and instead of throwing me a life raft, he was asking me to carry a heavier anchor. My mind started racing with all the reasons why this was impossible. And I don't mean it will be tight. I mean impossible. I started thinking about my bank account. I started thinking about the bills piling up at home. The number $36,000 kept echoing in my head. That's a salary for some people. That's a brand new car. And he wanted me to just pledge it, to give it away, when I didn't even know where my next paycheck was coming from. It was the definition of insanity. But the rabbi just sat there, calm as a lake, waiting for my answer. He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He just waited. Have you ever had someone ask you for something you were 100% sure you couldn't give? Did you get angry like I did? Tell me about a time you felt demanded of when you had nothing left. While I was staring at him, fuming with anger, a specific memory flashed into my mind. It was a memory that cut deep. Just a few weeks prior, my mother-in-law had been in town visiting us. It should have been a happy visit, but the reality was I was so broke that I couldn't even afford to pay the electricity bill. On the Sabbath Shabbat, we sat in the dark, literally. The power company had cut us off. My mother-in-law, my family, sitting there in the shadows because I couldn't keep the lights on. That shame was fresh. It was raw. So, with that memory burning in my brain, I looked at the rabbi. Does he know? I thought. Does he know my mother-in-law sat in the dark? Does he know I'm a failure? But then the anger started to shift. It was strange. It went from "how dare you" to "why are you asking?" The rabbi wasn't a cruel man. I knew him. He was wise. He saw something I didn't. I was trapped in the logic of scarcity. I have nothing, so I can give nothing. He was operating on a different logic, the logic of faith and flow. Something came over me. I can't explain it as anything other than a moment of clarity. I started to remember all the things I had learned over the years about giving tzedakah. I remembered the ancient teachings that say you can actually test the Creator with charity. There is a concept that says, "Test me in this, says the Lord, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it." I sobered up. The trance of self-pity broke. I realized the rabbi wasn't trying to take money from me. He was trying to open a channel for me. He was challenging me to stop acting like a victim and start acting like a partner with the divine. Do you believe in the idea that giving opens up the flow for receiving? Or do you think that's just superstition? I'm really curious to hear your take on this philosophy in the comments. I looked back at Rabbi Raskin. The anger was gone. I felt a single tear roll down my cheek. It was a tear of surrender. I wasn't surrendering to the rabbi, I was surrendering to the situation. I realized that my way, the worrying, the stress, the holding on tight, wasn't working. I opened my mouth and one word came out, okay. I took a deep breath and I said to him, listen to me clearly. This is not my problem anymore. This is not my issue. This is God's problem now. I continued, I will put my blood, my sweat, and my tears into my business. I will work harder than I have ever worked. But you told me that God tests us with tzedakah. You told me we can test him back. So if you are saying that is true, then this must be true. Because if this isn't true, then none of it is true. It was the ultimate gamble. I was placing a bet on my faith. I was saying, I will do the work, but you have to provide the means. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was signing a contract. I looked him in the eye and said, I pledge you your $36,000. I didn't have $36, but I pledged $36,000. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was the moment I stopped looking at the empty bank account and started looking at the potential of what could be. I shifted from a mindset of, I can't afford this, to, how will we make this happen? The rabbi smiled. He didn't look surprised. He knew that by stretching me, by forcing me to commit to something bigger than my current reality, he was breaking the chains of my poverty mindset. This was the scariest financial decision of my life. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken with your money? Did it pay off? Share your story below. So what happened? Did I go bankrupt? Did they repossess the folding chair? No. That year, with God's help, and with an insane amount of hustle, blood, sweat, and tears, just like I promised, I fulfilled every single penny of that $36,000 pledge. I didn't win the lottery. I didn't find a bag of cash. The business started to move. The phone started to ring. Opportunities that were invisible to me when I was in a state of fear suddenly became visible when I was in a state of purpose. But it didn't stop there. The year after that, I doubled it again. And the year after that, I doubled it again. And the year after that, doubled again. I went from the folding chair back to the top, but this time, the foundation was different. It wasn't built just on ego or simple economics. It was built on a partnership. I realized that money is just energy. If you hoard it, it stagnates. If you circulate it, especially through giving, it flows back to you like a tidal wave. Here is the lesson I want you to take away today. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, I'm not a rich person. I'm barely putting food on my table. I get it, I've been there, I've sat in the dark, but maybe, just maybe, the reason you are barely getting by is because you are not being a good business partner for the Creator. Maybe the universe is waiting for you to raise your hand and say, I am ready to become wealthy. I will be a good steward of this money. You have to scare yourself a little. You have to test yourself. Be bold, be big, be brave. If you keep waiting until you have enough to give, you will never have enough. But if you give before you think you're ready, you signal to the world that you are open for business. If this story resonated with you, if it sparked a little fire in your gut to stop playing small, do me a favor, hit that like button. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this. Leave a comment, I am ready, if you are ready to change your financial destiny. And share this video with one friend who is stuck in a scarcity mindset. Welcome to Solomon's Treasury. I'll see you in the next video.